So this is go-to-market strategy. My name is Gwen Gillette. I am the CEO and founder of Social Phantom. Before we get into go-to-market strategy, I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am and how I got here. So for a long time, I was an AI engineer. So I built algorithms. To connect the dots, social media runs on algorithms. So that's really our area of expertise. I was working in supply chain and logistics, analyzing a bunch of open source consumer data, which lives on social media. At the time, we had an internal marketing person that was not doing very well for us. So I took over marketing. I grew our accounts to 500,000 followers in 90 days, and we had $25,000 in our bank account, which was the most amount of money we had had in about 3 years. So highly effective for us. I ended up speaking at Keystone Sessions, just teaching other people how I did what I did. And that actually generated enough interest in what I do to start my own business. So ironically enough, we are a marketing company that does not do any marketing. We office out of Keystone. All our leads walk through the door at Keystone. That has allowed me to hire 3 full-time employees, 5 part-time employees. I have 2 intern teams through Northland Caps. I forget to breathe when I speak, so I'm gonna do that now. And so we are in a rapid growth phase. So we have lots of people that are waiting to be onboarded. We're a high touch company. So typically every 3 clients, I need to make a new hire. So we are very much on that journey, and I'm very grateful to Keystone for that. So if you were at the previous presentations, as far as turning your idea into a business or building your business model Canva, I suggest that you go to Keystone, interact in the space, because it's gonna be super helpful at giving you the resources that you need. So just to put in perspective what we do, the average marketing agency, when they post on social for their clients, generates about 200 to 300 views a post. So that's about 3,000 views a month, and 90% of those views come from repeat followers. So unless your clients are somebody that you're trying to upsell to or that are continually buying from you, it's really not an effective strategy, and you're kind of just posting just to post. A lot of people will come to me and be like, I want to do social media. And I'm like, well, why? Do you have a good reason, or do you just want to do it because there's hype around doing it? So we'll get into that today when we talk about go-to-market. So for Social Phantom, our average views are between 2,400 and 10,000 per post. That generates around 75,000 views a month per client, and 98% of those views come from non-followers. So we are highly, highly effective at what we do as far as growing brand awareness, growing your reach, and ultimately growing your conversions. So here's a sample client of mine. Most of our clients have at least 1 viral video per month. We have accumulated over 58 million views for our clients in the last 2 years. And with account growth rates at 90% to 125% month over month. So that being said, we're gonna talk about go-to-market, social media, if you need it, and how to use it. So there's a lot that goes into the prep phase. So you need a business model Canva. We'll cover some of the aspects of what you need, and we'll spend a lot of time there. Then we'll talk about pre-launch, because you should test a lot of your assumptions that you did in your prep phase before you do your initial launch. And if you're doing your launch on social media and you don't do a pre-launch, you're not gonna have an effective strategy unless you're spending a ton of money on ads, because social media is about posting content consistently. People come to me all the time and they're like, I want to do a social media campaign to promote my event. Great, have you ever posted on social before? No? Okay, great, that's not a good way to promote your event. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about launch, and then we'll talk about post-launch, because this should be iterative. Social media is a great way to get open source data from your potential clients and how to iterate on your product or service. So this should be a reciprocal loop of always kind of making adjustments and testing your assumptions. So just so we're all on the same page, a go-to-market strategy is a plan to bring your product or service to your target customer through the right channels. Through the right channels is a really big one, so we'll talk about that a lot. Preparation. You need to define your market, a little bit different than defining your target audience. You need to decide on your positioning and messaging. These can go hand in hand. And you need to understand what your competitors are doing, what's working for them, how directly are you competing with them, and so we'll talk about some of that stuff. So first, defining your market. You want to understand what the urgent and important problem you're solving and who generally has that problem. So for me, when I first started, I was doing social media, and I really just did it for anybody that wanted to do social. And then I started to understand that mid-market and enterprise level companies either have an internal marketing team or they're going to pay a big agency to do their marketing. They're also doing a lot more ad spend. So for me, the people who have that urgent and important problem are typically nonprofits, social ventures, and small businesses. So that's exactly who we service. The next is understanding why the problem exists. So to understand that, you can actually look for macro trends online. So a good example is that 92% of SaaS companies fail, and the actual reason that they fail is because they have insufficient product market fit. So if I wanted to target only SaaS companies, I could use that as a macro trend to go to them and say, hey, we can help you define your product market fit through the surveys and data that we collect, and package that service offering for them. Similarly, we'll use a learning disability platform as an example today. So one in 5 children have a learning and thinking variation that creates cognitive disabilities in school, but really it's just a different way that they learn and prioritize learning and collecting information. So that could be a macro trend that learning platform could use to talk about how they are defining their problem. So target audience, you want to identify what problem you solve, the need that you meet, and who in general has that problem. So we kind of talked about this previously, but for me, like who in general has the problem that I actually meet a need for, that's nonprofits, social ventures, and small businesses. Similarly, in Kevin's presentation, he talked about like a marketplace model. So like the example of drivers versus passengers for Uber. So you need to understand like what problem you're solving and who you actually want to market to when you're solving that problem. And so that's relevant when you think about your target audience and who you actually need to be successful. Then you want to conduct primary and secondary research. Don't assume you know your target audience, right? We make a lot of assumptions. And a lot of times I will see people work with larger branding agencies and they'll build out full personas. And it's all in an assumption phase before they start posting. I do not recommend doing that. So primary research means you could survey people. So you could join Facebook groups that are generally around certain topics that you think your target audience is interested in. You can post surveys in there and start to collect data. You can also do interviews or focus groups with people that you know. There's companies that can set up focus groups for you. And then you do secondary research. So that involves analyzing existing data, reports, and studies, finding macro trends. You can also pay for secondary research analytics. Then you're going to analyze your competitors. So you really want to look at who they're targeting and how they're targeting. So do they have any social media content? How well does it perform? Are they running ads? You can actually search on Facebook, the company, and you can go to their about information and you can see if they're running any ads. And so if you know that company is successful, you can generally make the assumption that they're running successful ads. So one, you could model those ads if you wanted to, or you could understand what messaging you might want to incorporate in your own social media content. Then you want to segment your audience. So you want to break it into potential market segments. This could be done through demographic factors like age, gender, and income. So say your target audience is mostly men, you might want to be on YouTube. YouTube is 56% skewed towards men. So if that's who you're targeting, that would be one of your channels, and you would understand that you're effectively targeting that audience. Same with psychographic factors, so like interests, values, and lifestyles. Those people generally use social media platforms differently. They might not use social media at all. So understanding that can be super helpful. After this, the normal next step is to build personas. I recommend waiting on this step, at least until you've done your pre-launch. Then you can build your personas and activate your actual launch. So next is, I forgot to mention, all these slides will be available at the end on my Linktree, as well as a ton of other resources that I've put together through past presentations, how to prompt ChatGPT for different things. I will reference it a lot. There's a very unique way that I go about prompting it due to my AI background, so all those prompts will be available for you at the end. So your competition is all about understanding how you're differentiating. This step is more about thinking about how you're gonna market and whether or not you're gonna market differently than your competitors or directly against your competitors. It's not the same as doing like your competitor analysis to figure out your key activities in your business model. So this Excel sheet is available in an actual Excel sheet template that you can download at the end, but for this purpose, we have simplified it. So when I think about competitors, so for me, if I'm thinking about whether or not I'm gonna offer services to small businesses, mid-sized businesses, or enterprise level companies, I wanna fill out who my competitors are at the top and where they service companies in the market. So for a learning platform, the side might be a little bit different. It might be parents, teachers, and then schools. So it's different depending on whether you're direct to consumer or B2B. And so you just want to decide where you live. So if you live over here in this white space, you're meeting an unmet need. And so that unmet need should be something that you include in your positioning and your messaging to really differentiate yourself. You do not need to compete directly with your competitors, and you probably don't want to be near them because then your messaging is probably wrong because you don't need to be competing with them. Now, say you have a platform and you know you have one feature that's like 10 times better than your competitors. Then you would want to compete directly. So Coke and Pepsi is a great example of this. I think Coke came out with an ad that said they sold like 2 times more Coke than Pepsi in a year. And then Pepsi responded by having an ad of a child going to a vending machine, buying 2 Cokes to stand on them to then push the Pepsi button. So if you know you're directly competing, it's okay to make those direct statements. Same for like if any of you use Monday.com or ClickUp. If you search ClickUp, you will find a Monday.com ad. And so that's really good targeting related to you directly competing with a certain competitor. So it's helpful to know where you live. Positioning. So you want to determine how your product or service fits into a marketplace and why it's better than another one. So your positioning can be different based on your target audience segment. So for one segment, it might be the most convenient option. And for a different segment, it might be the most high quality option. So like for us, we're typically the most convenient option for a small business, just because they typically don't have the funds for a larger marketing company, and we can come in, provide that lower cost service and execute on it really well. Versus for nonprofits, we're typically actually a really higher quality option because lots of nonprofits do marketing really, really terribly. And if you want to talk to me about that after, you are welcome to. So the other thing with positioning is understanding the complexity of your sales cycle. So go to market, I'm talking mostly on the marketing side. I'll touch I'll make a few points on kind of like the sales side. But if you have a really complex sales cycle, it might not make as much sense for you to spend a lot of money on your front end marketing, because marketing in and of itself is a funnel, right? You have your brand awareness content, you have your clips and value adds that kind of establish that you know what you're talking about, and then you typically need long form content, because once somebody has invested time with you, and by long form, I mean, it could be 3 to 7 minutes or longer, or a long blog. That's where you want your call to action to live, because then those people are more likely to click after they've invested that in-depth time with you. And so that's a funnel on its own. So then if you have a complex sales cycle behind that, you have an additional funnel, and you need to understand that timing and that resource allocation as you plan your go-to-market. So then positioning. All of these things go into positioning and should be somewhat iterated as you start to get data, and we'll talk about that. But so your target audience should determine your positioning, right? You could have different positioning for different audiences. Your positioning statement, you could have certain promotions. So like for us, we do discounts for nonprofits. So that's a different positioning than we do for small business. Then you have your product benefits, which might be, certain ones might be relevant to certain segments versus not. And then whether you're directly competing with competitors for certain segments or not. So in general, these are the 5 ways that companies will generally position their services. So you have quality-based, so quality is your main selling point. You have price-based, so maybe you're offering something at a more affordable value. Maybe you're offering it at a higher value because it's a white glove service. You have problem solving, so if you're in that unmet needs space, your positioning should probably be problem solving because you have such a unique problem. The odds that you are there is typically low, but if you do think of something, then that's a good place to live. Value-based, so if your consumers are really focused on brand loyalty and values and purpose, then you might want to do value-based positioning. So like Coca-Cola also has value-based positioning where they promote values like happiness, friendship, and sharing. You can see that in their commercials, right? Those are those happy singing ones. Might be Pepsi, but same thing. Purpose. So if you target audience is really purpose aligned, you would want to focus on purpose as your positioning statement. So like Nike is purpose focused. They focus on sustainability and innovation in activewear specifically. So then your messaging. So you should have your value proposition if you did your business model Canva. So you should know the problem you solve and then why people should go with you and why they should do it now. Then you want to have your strategic narrative. So let me go back for a second. Your strategic narrative is really just a clear way to transfer your business and what I would consider your founder sales to your audience. So what you want in your strategic narrative is what it is that you do, what's the macro trend that's happening that you're solving, why you can serve that particular audience, and why they should go with you over the competition. So if you look up go-to-market, everyone will say you need this strategic narrative for marketing. I disagree with that slightly. I think your strategic narrative should live on your website, and it should be something that is incorporated in your sales and when you're doing founder sales specifically. For marketing, it's a lot better to have a simplified, powerful, high-level story that then can be connected into your lower-level audience segments. So some examples of that would be Apple. Think different. So before I go into the example, I just want to tell you guys, so in 1990, Apple was trying to figure out who their target audience was. And in general, at the time, there were workstation users and PC users. And then they realized that there's actually a new target audience, which was the professional workstation user. So that happened in 1990 that they identified their target audience and the emergence of that audience segment. And it wasn't until 1997 that they started their Think Different campaign. So it takes a long time to get really good messaging that has this kind of potential. So just to set your expectations for that. I would argue though that with social media and increased access to data, you can definitely do it faster, but you want to be iterating because it does take time to actually figure out what's going to work well. So what worked well about this is Think Different is really their high-level statement. And then instead of using words to pull it down into audience segments, they use visuals. So then they had one of these with John Lennon that said Think Different. They had one with Nelson Mandela. And so that's all appealing to different target audiences based on what they know about that particular person with that high-level message of Think Differently, be unique, creative design. Another example is, I forgot the name of this company. But this is basically a software company that helps every industry is shifting. Leaders are creating new experiences through a new kind of business model. So that's their high-level statement. And then their individual marketing campaigns. So like for the new VP of product, from one-time product to continuous innovation, hashtag always in beta. If you're a developer, I really find that hilarious. So that resonates with me well. And then they have one for each different audience. My guess is that in their sales cycle, they are targeting these 4 people. And then those are the decision makers that would choose to use their software. So pre-launch, your goal is to increase awareness, credibility, and market research. You want to be solidifying your target audience during this stage and educating your target market to build up an organic following that can help you kind of beta test and promote during your launch. So before you pre-launch in a way on a digital platform on social media, you should always be doing these 3 things. So thinking about lowest hanging fruit. So sometimes you are already in a networking group. Maybe you came from a company and you know somebody that could benefit from your product or service, or at least use it to give you some type of feedback on like, oh, well, this is the actual thing that I found valuable about that, right? Because you're so in it. If you created it, it's hard to pull yourself out. And so a lot of times people forget that step, and it's a lot easier than doing 90 days of social media or a paid ad spend or whatever. Then you want to build channel partners. So like for us, we don't do branding. It's not our strength. So we have brand partners. One, people can come to us, and if they need a brand revamp or they don't have a brand, we can send them to them. And then once the branding is done, they can send them to us, right? And we can promote that with like a consistent brand look and feel. And then you want to grow your organic following. So like I said before, you can't just start posting on social and hope that your launch will be successful. You have to have that following and that momentum on the page to actually ensure that, one, the algorithm is sorting you where you need to be sorted so you get to the right people at the right time. And two, that you have people that are already following your page that you're going to reach when you post. So again, this is a little bit simplified, but this Excel sheet is linked for you at the end. So really, you want to outline in your pre-launch your objectives, your KPIs, and your timeline. I think a good timeline for a pre-launch is 90 days. So after the first 30 days, you'll typically figure out if you're hitting the right target audience and what platform you're hitting them on. And then you just double down and build momentum, and you're testing messaging and different things that resonate with your audience. So for this, then you want to talk about your channels, the activities that are related on your channels, and the resources that you need. So for this, we're going to use the Learning Disabilities platform as an example. So the objective is to build awareness and credibility through content sharing and community building. So your KPI might be 1,000 users into an actual community. We'll talk about what that means in a second. And if any of you have ever read 1,000 True Fans, that is plenty for a go-to-market and a launch. So great book, highly recommend it. And then timeline 3 months, which again, you can adjust this. You could do 6 months if you're like, maybe you did this in your basement and you don't have a network, so you couldn't do any of the other pre-launch steps. But 3 months is generally a good timeline. The assumption that we're making is that most parents will search for a solution to a problem that their kid has. So we want to be optimizing for search, which is likely going to be on Google and YouTube. So we want to have a YouTube channel. We want to have a blog. A lot of times Quora too, Google has changed the way that they do SEO, and they're now up promoting Quora and Reddit feeds in their discussion section. So it's like, sometimes it's like the third thing that you see. And that's a great place to just directly answer questions that your target audience is having. And then you could take that idea and turn that around and create a piece of content around it. And then a community platform or group. So this could be Slack, this could be a Facebook group, but this could be an email list, a newsletter. But generally on social media, you do not own your followers. And when people visit your website, you don't own that piece of traffic, right? And so you want to have a way that you're soft converting people into a list that you can nurture over time to actually drive a true conversion, right? Because unless you have like an e-commerce product where people can buy it in 2 clicks, that might convert via social, but a lot of times they're going to need that warmer nurturing through the process. So then the activities would be, so the blog is going to educate parents on learning disabilities. You might talk about symptoms, diagnosis, solutions, best practices. And then your CTA is not buy or sign up for our product or service. It's sign up for our newsletter or community so that we can continue to add value to you, right? You're building trust with your consumer that way. Then, and all you will need for that, you do need a website builder, a subject matter expert, or to become a really good researcher, and then ChatGPT, which all the prompts that you need for that are at the end. YouTube channel, repurpose your blog content for the video. You can also invite guests on, like expert guests, to add value in that way. And those are interchangeable. Like if you're more of a video person and you want to create the video first and then turn that into a blog, that's perfectly fine. And then Quora, you can answer questions for learning disabilities. You can do that in-house. You don't really need anything else. And then Facebook groups. So I recommend joining like 10 Facebook groups that are related to your product or service. So lots of times these communities already exist. See how you can get involved in what already exists and start adding value that way. So that would be, you could share your blog content. You could share small clips from your blog or your YouTube as a way to add value to people within that group. Because building trust with the community organizer and host itself is super important in your launch phase, which we'll talk about. And then on your community platforms, you want to be able to share advice with parents and help facilitate conversations. Again, positioning yourself as that resource and solution without directly telling people that you are the resource and the solution. Marketing is all about invoking curiosity and creating demand. So that's what all these things are meant to do without directly telling somebody that that's what you're doing. If you want to do that, you can just run paid ads. Okay, in-house. The other thing I would recommend in this step that's not in here is doing something like Instagram or TikTok. So maybe you're targeting specifically millennial parents or people that are Gen Zs have kids now, right? Okay, yeah, Gen Z parents, and maybe you want to do that on TikTok. I don't recommend doing all platforms at once, but if you picked one or the other, it's a great place to start building influencer relationships because using influencer marketing in your go-to-launch strategy is super effective. And influencers will charge you less if you have built a relationship with them over time. So you engage with their content. You send them direct messages asking them about their content so that when you're ready to do your launch and you say, hey, would you promote my product or service? It's not a cold ask because they get cold ask all the time. And so sometimes they'll do it for you for free. Specifically, you want to target people in between the range of 10K and 100K. I do have my influencer outreach template at the end for you guys as well. So best practices is you want to optimize towards answer targets. So in 2023, Google was outsearched by TikTok. They weren't necessarily super happy about that. So they changed from keyword optimization to answer targets. So as of 2024, they are optimizing for answer target phrases. So that means how can I, what, why. You can use a site called Answer the Public to put in all your keywords, and it will tell you the highest search volume around what questions people are asking related to that keyword. And your blogs don't have to be long anymore, by the way. They only have to be 350 characters. So adding an FAQ of the highest searched questions related to your keywords is a great way to optimize SEO for 2024 and 2025 and moving forward.
Is that the same as the AEO that they talk about? Or is AEO different from answer target?
It's a little bit different. We can talk about it at the end.
Sure.
So don't underestimate the power of relatability and authenticity. Not all your posts have to be to the effect of trying to sell somebody something or to create curiosity about your product or service. A lot of times people want to know you. It's a lot easier for people to follow and get behind a real human being than it is for them to get behind a really large brand. So don't be afraid to do that. Go where your audience is. So I had a client that was a dog training client. We made a bunch of social media content for them. It did great. Who doesn't love dogs? But it didn't do great at really converting for them. So what they ended up doing was going to dog parks and setting up a little station, like booth, just at a park that said like free dog training. And they generated a ton of clients that way. So don't be afraid to figure out where your audience is and go to them. It doesn't have to be digital. It doesn't have to be social. Similarly, like if any of you guys know Ulam, so the app that just got like 29K during Pure Pitch Rally, we were having a marketing meeting with them the other day, and they're talking about targeting immigrants and refugees. And so we were talking about, well, do they really use email? Most of them are actually on WhatsApp. So creating a WhatsApp community or a way to communicate with them that way is going to be much more effective as far as them thinking about potential users. Then pull up what's working into your higher level messaging and branding. So I gave a presentation at GEW in 2022, and I talked about bottom-up branding, right? And it's all about not making assumptions about your target audience. So as you do these steps and you figure out what was the piece of content that people most engaged on, don't pick the highest view rate content because that's a different metric for a different thing. But for the highest engaged content, what questions did people ask? What created DMs? You can use a free software called Metricool, and you can upload your social media accounts to it, and it'll tell you which post generated the most followers for you. That's also a really good metric to use because that means that content resonated enough for someone to hit the follow button. And so those are the things, what messaging and branding was in that you should pull up into your higher level messaging and branding for your launch. Then you're ready to launch. So your goal would be to drive user adoptions or sales. We're going to continue with the learning disabilities platform. So we want to drive product adoption by announcing on organic social and amplifying via paid ads. This does not mean Facebook ads. We will talk about it in a second. And then I would also say influencer marketing, which I will talk about as well. For this platform specifically, 10K users on the app is reasonable. For you, it might be something different. You might just want to get 10 new clients for your product or service, right? Make this what makes sense to you. And then timeline is generally a month. You can't after a month, if you're like, hey, we just launched, but it's been a month, it's not relevant. So by then you're in your post-launch phase. So your channels are gonna be your organic social channels that have been working. You're gonna look at paid channels. You're gonna look at influencers, and then any type of PR around the launch that you can generate is gonna be super useful. So for organic, you would wanna announce on your organic channels. I recommend doing this in 2 ways. One is like your generic style post. It could be a video, a carousel, graphic, whatever, that says, hey, we've launched with a call to action. That might be your pinned video or your featured post on LinkedIn, or you can have a featured video on YouTube, right? So you want your announcement there where people can see it. Hero section on your website as well. Then I would also recommend creating a video based off that one that I mentioned previously where it's your highest engagement video. Like create that or create a trend that got the most views for you and put the announcement in the middle. If you put it at the start, you're gonna mess up the video because you've not hooked them in the same way. And if you put it at the end, only 75% of people that view your video do not make it to the end. So put it in the middle. And then that's your second announcement, and that'll get more views and actually more reach for people that don't follow you and things like that. Then for paid, you wanna do amplify via search ads on Google and YouTube. These are the most effective ads. Like for Google, you can run it against keywords or answer targets or your competitors if you're doing direct competition. And just $5 a day converts really, really well. So Google is a really good place to run those search placement ads. And then influencers. So you want to target between 10 to 100 influencers, right? Say 50% of them say yes. That's why you target so many. So that's when you're doing your direct ask, and you want to ask them to create a video sharing your product or service. It's a little bit easier if you have a physical product to get them to do this, because a lot of influencers have their address that they'll just send you to send them a free product. And then you can say something like, if you love it, share it in your video. And about 25% of them will. So you have the capacity to do that. I recommend doing that opposed to having them tell you that they're going to charge you $1,000 for a video, depending on if you've got investment and what your budget is. And then always when you're working with influencers, you need to provide them with some guidelines. So like typically I recommend creating a media kit that says like, hey, here's our brand. Here's generally the look and feel that we wanna, the vibe that we wanna create. And here's what not to say about us. So I worked for a company called Immersion, which is a neuroscience as a service company. And they really, really hated the word biometric data. I would argue that they slightly used it, but nonetheless, they did not want anyone saying that. So if there's certain things you don't want them to say or you don't want them to miscategorize your product or service, you need to tell them that. And then also using some sort of affiliate tracking link so that in your post-launch, you know which influencers you want to re-engage, because not all influencers convert well. Okay. So you could use Branch. I really love Branch so that you can track analytics around which ones converted well. So in your post-launch, you can re-engage, say, 2 or 3 that did really, really well and cut your spend that way.
What is the brand?
It's called Branch, yeah. I can't remember it's .io or .ai, but like a tree branch. And if you use an app, Branch actually will integrate into your app and you can track different usage metrics in there as well. Okay. So PR, so you can post on Product Hunt, you can post on Reddit, you can post on TechCrunch. I know some people have relationships with like KCTV. If you have those things, that's a great time to utilize those to actually make your official announcement. And you can also make like a news announcement on your website page, but you still want it to live in that hero section on the first page when they land. Then you want to evaluate. So Evaluate your process, what worked, what did not, tweak resources accordingly. So maybe your Instagram's doing really well and your YouTube channel isn't. I would say YouTube generally takes about 6 months to do well, so I would probably, give it a little bit more time. But at the same time, if you don't have the resources, it's not converting for you, then maybe you limit what you're posting. Maybe you do 1 video a month. I know a lot of YouTube channels that actually have a lot of followers and they only post 1 video a month. Then if the results hold, is this process scalable? So when we first started, we were posting 14 times a week for clients, 2 times a day. That's not scalable for me as a human, but it also wasn't scalable for the client, right? Because if they're in the video, if they're the talent source of the video, if they're checking all those videos, that we had a really high burnout rate. So that wasn't really a scalable option. So we had to figure out how much is enough to post to grow, which the answer is 3 times a week, by the way. And then if you wanted to scale that up, I recommend posting somewhere between 6 and 7 and nothing over that, because if you're a business owner and not a content creator or an influencer, you have a lot of other important things that you need to be doing. Then did you find a new market? So I've had a lot of clients where we thought like, hey, this is our product or service and this is our target audience. And we found like really this audience is much better. They're converting much better. And when we talk about it this way, it's actually super highly more effective at driving followers, conversions, and ultimately money in the bank. So you want to be evaluating all those things after your launch, and you probably wanted to have evaluated them in your pre-launch as well, which we talked about. So the goal after 1 year would be to have 4 to 6 things that are really working well so that you can count on that revenue and start to make projections based on like, my go-to-market's working, here's my stable marketing, here's our sales cycle. I'm not a sales expert, but I would say you should probably be doing this internally on your sales side as well. If you have people jumping on sales calls, you can record those calls, do things like that of like, what did this salesperson say versus that, so you can understand better messaging when you actually have those calls. So it's not just for marketing. So then post-launch, optimize and scale your channels, scale down what's not working and scale up what is, and then explore new channels to test. So say we're continuing with the same example, we've done Instagram already, maybe now we wanna try TikTok. Because now we've been doing direct sales to parents, but now we really wanna hit teachers hard. There's a whole teacher talk thing going on, so we wanna do that. So that would be something that you could add and test out how well that resonates. Again, you're gonna be testing your messaging out, you're gonna be testing out that conversion and so on. So for post-launch, you wanna optimize and scale to drive further product or service adoption. So say maybe our goal this time is 100K users on the app. Maybe your goal, if you have a service, is just 10 more customers, which is totally fine. And then your timeline would be 3 months for your post-launch. So again, you'll do organic, paid, influencer, and then exploring new partnerships. So if you didn't have channel partners before, now would be a really good time to explore them, especially since you know a lot more about your target audience, and you probably know a lot more about what things you don't do for them. And so that's a great way to find channel partnerships. So scale up your performing channels, maybe add a new channel, and then you ran paid ads, so now you should know which one converted and which one did not. And so you wanna double down on the ones that are converting and then obviously turn off the ones that are not converting for you. Influencers, you wanna re-engage the influencers with high conversion rates. And you could possibly reach out to new influencers. So if you have a new goal of adding teachers to your channel, maybe you reach out to some of the teacher talk creators so that you can use them in your new influencer campaign. But again, you want to build those relationships, I'd say at least for 2 to 3 weeks before you make your official ask. And then new partnerships. So test partnerships. For the learning platform for kids with disabilities, you could test out pediatric clinics or schools. And you're essentially selling to a business instead of direct to a consumer. So thinking about that as you start to grow on your platform. One thing I will say that this table of fails to account for is usage and customer retention. So once you have people on your app or that have bought your product or service in your launch phase, you want to understand if you're retaining them. Are they satisfied? How often are they using the app? Did they download it and never open it again? Is it functioning for them? Those are super important things to know in your post-launch. You can even do that through your community channel. You could send out surveys via email, things like that. But those are super important things to understand so that you're not just continuing to sell something that people are ultimately unsatisfied with or not using effectively. Because even if people bought your product or service, maybe they aren't your right target audience. So those are different ways that you can kind of think about. Maybe they are and you just need to change some things so that you can think about your business. So 2 things to note. Go-to-market strategies will be different for B2C products and B2B products. So with B2C, you want to focus more on growth hacking because social media is your friend. It's your easiest way to meet your consumer. I also think that with B2B, every person in a business is a consumer themselves. So I still think social media can have value, but you're probably thinking more about sales enablement, and your sales cycle is probably a little bit longer because maybe on social you found your internal champion, but not maybe your decision maker. And so you have to think about that. Then go-to-market will be different for small companies versus big companies. I'm sure this is somewhat obvious, but smaller companies can launch pretty quickly without much internal prep, whereas bigger companies are going to need more internal prep to drive that internal alignment. The biggest thing that I think larger marketing agencies fail at is that it's taking them 3 weeks to 60 days to 90 days to turn around a video edit and get it out. That's not very timely. Trends change on a 2-week, 30-day basis. We have clients all the time that are like, can I have a 30-day content calendar? And I'm like, absolutely not, you cannot. We do it on a 2-week basis because things change that fast. If you want a 30-day content calendar, do marketing in a different way. So those are just a few things to note. Here is my QR code with all the resources I talked about. We filmed this, so we'll upload the video to the Linktree. I speak at sessions a lot, and we update it pretty frequently. So if you want to save it, pin it, I'm always putting new resources on there for different things that I find. That's it. Yeah.
So for me, so we've already tried the social media thing, it didn't work. Do you recommend people, because of the algorithm, if they come to you to start over, or do you like work with what they have, or is it generally like we're just gonna start from scratch?
No, so you always want, it depends on the platform, so if it's TikTok and it didn't work, I would say start over. TikTok up promotes newer accounts. So if you start doing it really effectively, then it's going to up promote your account because it's kind of giving you that dopamine hit. And then you can keep creating, because sometimes with TikTok too, they're a little finicky and you can get your account regulated, which I have done so that you guys don't have to do. I've made every mistake on my TikTok. So when I post a video, it gets like 1 view. But so TikTok, start over. For Instagram, you want to have an account that has at least been in existence for 6 months. So sometimes people will come to me and they'll be like, I don't have an Instagram account at all. And I'm like, oof, you better have a long timeline, because Instagram is trying to protect against anti-bots. So I have started actually, since this happened last time for me, I've started creating like accounts so that they have a timestamp, so that if somebody comes to me with that, I can say, hey, okay, I have one that nobody has used that has been in existence for 3 months. So that was something that somebody else recommended I did the last time they didn't have any Instagram account. So if you've already done Instagram, you just kind of start over. Don't go and delete everything. Most apps don't like you deleting things. You can private it or archive it. That's always my recommendation there. For YouTube, I think you just keep posting, right? You decide if those videos are useful or not. You can private them if they're not, and then you can keep going. For LinkedIn, I wouldn't say it's worth deleting the account and starting over either. Yeah.
Early on, you mentioned that you have brand marketers, or how do you partner with those? Can you talk a little bit about your brand?
Yeah, so like the AI Club is one that I've used before. So they have like a team of brand people. And so typically it's more just like, it's like a referral relationship, right? So they send people to me to do certain
Sure.
things that they can't do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times companies are positioned to do like, say, a 30-day, 90-day campaign, and we're a lot more on the maintenance side. We run campaigns, but you can't really run organic social campaigns effectively unless you've done that maintenance. So they'll send people to us for that, and then we'll send people to them as far as like brand creation and things
Yes.
like that.
So you said AI Club?
Yes,
What is that the name of the site?
AI Hub. Sorry,
AI
sorry, AI Hub. I've also used Andy Clark. He's great. He did all Keenex branding, so I plan to do their marketing if they keep me.
So I've created an Instagram account for my company, but it's been a while and it's rebranding.
Okay.
Like I haven't posted anything on it either. Should I make a new one or?
No, I would use that account and just re-update the picture, update the bio. Also, please, in your bio, make your bio searchable. Don't put what you do in your bio. Nobody's gonna find your account that way, right? Like, don't put your tagline in your bio either, because nobody is searching that. You know, like you wanna know what people are actually searching to be able to find you so that your account comes up. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? No? Thank you guys so much for attending.